Today's society is becoming more and more sexualized, and in the digital world we live in, pornography is available to anyone who wants it. It is highly addictive, and like other addictions, the habit can be difficult to overcome. Joining us from Cambria, California is Kent Levis. He is a retired California Superior Court judge and the author of Coming Clean. Kent, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here.
Now, as I said in my opening, our culture is highly sexualized. How does this impact the way we view our sexuality compared to how God intended it?
I think that it ruins what God intended. God intended, I believe, from my reading of the Bible, that sexuality was to be between two people. It was to be an expression of their love for each other, their care for each other. And we've made it something very shabby. We've made it something sort of like eating popsicles. Uh, there's nothing wrong with eating popsicles in the right context, but it's you just eat the popsicle, you throw the stick away, and you move on. And that's sort of to a degree, that's what sex has become today.
Now, you write that you struggled with secret sexual sin from a young age. How did it begin?
It was the one thing in my life that I could probably get away with, if you will. And I could get away with it as long as nobody knew about it. And so I started acting out masturbation at a young age and went through kind of the typical things that a teen would go through. And then in college, things became a little more involved. And then really, I don't think that I was addicted to sexual sin until the advent of my first computer. When I found that computer, and on that computer that I could go to any kind of a website and see anything I wanted to see at any time of the day or night, as long as I was alone. And it didn't cost me a thing, and nobody knew about it. And I was hooked. It was, to me, it was like a kid who's been smoking marijuana and all of a sudden gets his first hit of crack. I was done. Once I hit that website, I was just done.
Now, with other addictions, there's people that hit a rock bottom, like when it comes to either drugs or alcohol. With pornography, what was your rock bottom?
My rock bottom, I think, was when I reached the realization that I couldn't stop. And there was no way that I could stop. And I needed to get help to stop. And I was through just a very accidental survey, or I don't know what they were doing exactly. They weren't looking for me, but I was discovered using my computer at work for pornography. And all of a sudden, I needed to tell my wife about it. My career was in jeopardy.
Wow.
And I knew this is okay. I do it now or I don't do it at all. Let's do this and get it done.
Wow. Now, most men want to live their lives in quiet anonymity. Tell us why this is a bad idea.
In this case, because anonymity allows you to do whatever you want, and it allows you to get farther and farther and deeper into sexual sin. And as long as you don't have to own up to it, as long as you don't have to take responsibility for it, you'll go farther than you ever wanted to go, and it'll cost you more than you ever wanted to pay. And it is a progressive disease, if you want to call it a disease. It is progressive. And it's not until you open up, confess the sin to others, take responsibility for it out in the open, and not hide in the dark corners of the world, it's only then that you can really begin to start dealing with it.
Now, when it comes to programs like Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the first steps that they do is make you say your name and then say, "I'm an alcoholic." What was did you have to, how did you have to come out to your wife about your addiction?
Well, I just sat down with her and at home and told her what I had been doing. That I'd been on the computer and that I'd been watching pornography, and that there was a problem now, and I had to do something about it, and that I was going to. Made a promise to her that I would.
What was her reaction to it?
I don't know that it would work for everybody. I'm not a psychologist, but it worked for me. She did exactly what she needed to do for me. And she said, "I love you. I'm not going to leave you. I'm not going to abandon you. And I will do everything I can to help you. But it's your problem. And you're going to have to deal with it, not me." And that was exactly right for me because it put the responsibility back on me, exactly where that responsibility belonged.
And speaking of couples, there may be some that are watching that would admit that they watch pornography together as a way of, quote, spicing up their marriage or looking for creative ways to elevate the intimacy in the bedroom. Is that a slippery slope to be on?
That's a very slippery slope to be on. If you want to spice up the marriage, there are all kinds of books that don't contain pornography that tell you about ways to spice up your marriage. You don't need to watch pornography to do that. That's, it just is not going to help. It's probably going to really harm you. Uh, there's, like I said, it's going to take you farther than you wanted to go, and it's going to cost you more than you're willing to spend. And that's, I think, particularly true of that kind of a situation because they spice up their marriage, then they have to go to the next step and the next step and the next step because once they spice it up the first time, that becomes normal and routine, and now they need to go to the next step. And you're going to go places you don't want to go.
Now, we often associate the issue of porn addiction as a male problem, but there are those that say it is quickly becoming an issue that more and more females are having to deal with. What have you heard?
There are statistics that tell us that in the church, actually, the ladies that are in the church, 25% of them have used porn or are using porn.
Wow.
And that's a huge number.
Absolutely. Now, you write in your book that unless we deal with sin in its infancy, it continues to grow. So what would you tell someone who says, "Oh, I can handle this on my own"?
I'd say to them that if you think you can handle it on your own, then you go ahead and do that. And by the way, how's that been working for you? And usually it's not. I have not seen anyone that can really handle it on their own. If you're a Christian and you don't let God do it for you, you're not going to get better. That was the turning point for me, is when I finally came to God and said, "God, I've tried everything that I know how to do to stop this, and I can't. And unless you do this for me, unless you lead me out of this, I'm never going to get out." And then God did start working with me, and so you can't. I have never met a person so far that could do it on his own.
You refer to your moral healing as a journey. Why?
Because the the problem itself is progressive. We start out like when I started out and I first looked at a Playboy magazine, I was just really ashamed and guilty because I looked at the Playboy magazine. And then I looked at a Penthouse magazine, Playboy was nothing. And so the sin starts small and it keeps growing, and the conscience keeps getting seared so that the things that you did when you first started out, they're nothing. You don't worry about that. That's just easy stuff. Uh, Meanwhile, the disease is progressing, and it just is going to get worse and worse and worse, and that's why they call it a journey. And by the same token, when you get healed, when you're going through the healing process, that is a journey.
Now, you talked about how this was something that began from a very young age. I think this is something that starts off with a lot of people at a young age. Like I remember as a child, like trying to like tune to like what were the adult channels, but they were scrambled, and trying to make something out, or seeing if we could like peek over at a magazine that was covered at the magazine rack, just to see what it was all about. So there's obviously a lot of curiosity with children. So Kent, what would you say to parents about how to best protect their kids from sexual images and temptations online?
They have got a problem now that was not as prevalent when I was young or when you were young. Every kid has a cell phone. They have access to TVs, and not TVs, but the monitors on their computers. The average age at which a child starts using pornography in the United States is 14 years of age.
Wow.
And if I were a parent, I am a parent actually, but my kids are, of course, grown. If I were a parent of a child today, I would start early, and I would start talking, and I would start talking very openly about sexual sin. And I would encourage them to share with me what's going on. I don't know if it's still the same today, but back when I was a kid, the only time that adults talk to kids about pornography and sexual sin was to say, "Don't ever do that," and that's a terrible thing, and you're horrible if you do it. And that's not what's going to get a kid to listen. The child is going to have to go to someone they trust. I assume that's their parents. And the parents are going to have to go to them. The parents have to initiate the conversation. And the worst thing a parent can do, I believe, is just to ignore the problem. If the problem's there, it's not going to go away. If you ignore it, it just gets worse.
Now, Kent, I'm sure writing a book about your own struggles wasn't easy, especially with a topic like this. So why did you do it, and what do you hope readers will learn from your own journey?
I did it because I believe that God wanted me to write it. And what I want people to learn, they're not going to read the book and be healed from pornography. That's a long process. It involves counseling, groups with other people that struggle with sexual sin. It takes a lot of work to get out of that pornography circle that you're in. What I want the book to do is I have to start every day with God, and I have to acknowledge my sin, and I have to ask God to keep me from going back to that sin, because Satan isn't through. He still tempts me. And so what I've provided, I think, is a message every morning that deals, if people struggle with it, they may not be addicted, but if they struggle, they will be able to read this. It will offer, I hope, inspiration, confrontation. Some of the questions I ask are not easy questions. You really have to think about them. And you have to examine your life. But I also want them to know that they're not alone, that other people struggle with this too, and that it can be overcome. And I hope that it would offer encouragement, it would offer comfort during the times that they fail. And it would just, I hope, bring a closer walk with God on a daily basis for people who are struggling with sexual sin, particularly, but any other besetting sin, because the book speaks to basically besetting sin, the sins that you can't get rid of. And so it can be used for any sin. Uh, start the day, start the day with God, and and recognize your problem in the morning so that it doesn't plague you during the day.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Kent Levis is a retired California Superior Court judge and the author of Coming Clean. Kent, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I really appreciate your giving me the time to speak about this today. I appreciate you. Thanks.